I'm a dad who games, and this is my Queen Anne Victoria in The Sims 4. This is part 1 of my series of homes throughout the 20th century, beginning here in the 1900s. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an architectural connoisseur. My knowledge is completely layman, but a Google search gave me enough information to determine that a Queen Anne Victorian was all the rage in the 1900s. Here in New Jersey, you can see them everywhere in all their bright color glory. It's like a thing to have your Victorian be colorful. Purples, oranges, blues. Let me know in the comments if you've got houses like this in your community. But as we'll see, the options in The Sims 4 aren't all that hot, so we'll do the best we can when it comes to the exterior. That being said, a couple prime details of a Queen Anne, aside from it being a large house, is the presence of a tower with a conical roof and a wraparound porch. The two most important packs, in my opinion, for making Victorians are Strangerville and Vampires. There might be others, but these two at least have a cornucopia of great assets. Because I like to maintain the same style on the inside as well as the out, all of the woodwork from columns, railings, windows, doors, and arches are all from Strangerville. As for the walls and floors, that's where the Vampire pack comes into play. Roofs are always a challenge, but I figured I'd include in my video all of my trials and tribulations in finagling them in just the right way to have them work with the floor plan. Granted, trying to make roofs work usually requires manipulating that floor plan. That's why doing all of the exterior design first will make it so that you can focus completely on decorating the inside of your build when the time comes. I also used some of the advice I got from some Twitter pals in making A-frames for the top floor of this house. But as you can see, fretting with roofs was my biggest time sink in this entire build. The design of this house is simply inspired by a stock image of a Queen Anne Victorian that this website used in their list of houses through the decades. I simply made it my own using all of my favorite sim assets. I've always wanted to have a Victorian, but completely modern on the inside. I mean, I'd still want to have all the vintage woodwork that would be found on the inside, but the decorations, the furniture, and the most important room, the kitchen, would all be hyper modern. But honestly, nowadays, I'd be completely happy to find a patch of land in the woods to build a tiny home. I'd work remotely and just live out my days with my wife, having what we need delivered. I mean, who'd really want to deal with the upkeep of these massive historical landmarks? I don't want to be the curator of my own home. That doesn't mean I don't enjoy building them in The Sims. Using all the great assets from Strangerville is really fun. They all match in their color options, and it makes designing more enjoyable and quick. I can't stand cycling through every color of every door or window hoping for the right combination, let alone that they actually match. But those roofs! I really couldn't decide what I wanted to do with the roofs of the porches. Ultimately, I opted to leave them flat. I always wait until the end to decide on the exterior walls. If the woodwork doesn't match to begin with, it won't look right no matter which siding style you go with. Half of the windows I place won't end up being where I've even put them, but having a few in place will help in picking out the exterior walls. This front porch roof frustrated me to no end, but it gave me an excuse to play a little with platforms. I only just recently learned about how to use them, and well, I like to incorporate them when I can. Even though I ended up not using a roof, I still kept the platforms for a unique style. The really short walls also can help in making flat roofs look more interesting. That and the super short wrought iron fences. It's important to have something, or else you won't be able to have the exterior wood trim work. I want all the trims, all of the wood of the same color, which makes the roof trims frustrating with how there is never an exact match. I almost stuck with the shingled siding, but like the larger lines you get with traditional clapboard. I was almost ready to be done with the outside when I decided that the house needed a chimney. Like how I always incorporate columns to finish off house corners, a chimney adds that completeness. Plus, I don't think I've ever seen a Victorian without one. I could be wrong, but, well, I put a chimney, so there. I usually fully do the landscaping before starting the inside, but I think I just got tired of looking at the outside of this house. That being said, you need to consider house logistics. We need rooms for one, but first there needs to be stairs to connect the floors, which my first order of business was putting access to the roof patio. I don't like how, when the steps cut away the roof, the daylight that's let in totally fills the room. I figured it wouldn't have been odd to have a ladder in a Victorian, so that's what I ended up doing to cut down on all that sunlight. For the rest of the house, I had to put in an epic winding stairway. Decorating the inside always begins with making sure I am happy with the walls. I make sure I continue the same woodwork from the outside and then play around with different wall patterns and colors. I can't help but use the wood walls from the Vampire Pack. They're so epically Victorian. I already know what I want each room to be, but it's at this point that I make sure they are connected logically. I mean, you wouldn't walk through the kitchen to get to the dining room. How utterly common. The whole front room is for entertaining, so we have to have only the best for our guests. That's why we've got the big kitchen doors to keep the riffraff in their place behind the stove. I also just wanted to use more of the Strangerville doors. They're so cool. There's absolutely no rhyme or reason with where I started decorating. It just happened to be in the kitchen where I started. Maybe it was because it was the smallest room. Or maybe it was my avoiding the ordeal that became the massive living room. You're only seeing a small portion of my window treatment plight. I went through so many combinations before finally setting on what you see here. There are so many color combinations to consider. Even as I still procrastinated the front room, my design approach is to cycle through all of my favorites and make sure they all match in color. You need to look at the fabric color and the woodwork finish as well. These chairs just offer the best set of options as they are all part of a set, so they all have a guaranteed match. Exemplifying how things change, after picking out the furniture, I ended up changing the color of all the woodwork to assure color coordination. This made picking out carpets extraordinarily difficult. That's why I ended up using the same rugs from the Vampire Pack throughout the house. They just work the best. Still ever changing, I decided to isolate the living room to one side of the front area and converted the initial part into a piano nook. Then, more chairs and end tables. I don't know why, but it works in populating large areas. And I mean, it's for entertaining. You need places to sit to accommodate extravagant soirees. Putting wall decorations is always pleasing because it's the sign that a room is near completion. And I honestly really dislike this front room. Greener pastures were close at hand anyway, upstairs in the study. I can imagine guests sipping cocktails, discussing this or that topic in natural sciences, maybe even daydreaming of the future that we in the 21st century have already watched come and go. Either way, they didn't have televisions, they had books and pen and paper. Let's all hang out and talk about the world. Having an abundance of pictures adorning the walls always can be helpful in sparking those kinds of conversations. But this house is for a single individual or couple with a private suite inaccessible by any guests. Granted, I ended up forgetting to make access to the bathroom until after designing the bedroom. I wasn't initially going to make the room dark, but it just happened to go that way. When you think about it, wouldn't it be nicer to have a dark room for sleeping? Which is completely opposite to how I prefer to make my bathrooms extremely bright. But at the same time, there are only so many period bathroom pieces, so this room was kind of tough to be happy with. The attic became the art studio, as I imagined a couple with a woman who, in a society divided by gender, found solstice looking out from the upstairs window, seeking inspiration for her next piece of art. But then we go from the touching image to the final room of the build that I simply left as an access passage to the roof ladder. I made sure to enclose it to keep out those pesky rays of sun. With the inside complete, I moved on to the landscaping, starting first with placing some exterior lights on the house before decorating the porches, much like the inside, with entertaining on the mind. That and a lot of flowers. Lots of flowers. I really debated going all out with a huge Victorian garden, but I opted to keep it more low-key with some hedges, a fence divider, and some trees. I think it makes it a cozy lot despite the size of the house. This build clocks in at 226,863 simoleons on a 40 by 30 lot. As always, I didn't use any CC, but I do have Twisted Mexi's Better Build By mod installed mainly to be able to enter into camera mode while I'm in build mode. As I mentioned before, this is part 1 of my series of builds inspired by the decades of the 20th century. Next time, I will be representing the 1910s with a colonial revival residence. I hope you've enjoyed my video. I really appreciate that you've joined me for it. Please like and comment, and maybe even consider subscribing, as I plan to be making more videos just like this, as well as other content related to The Sims. I also stream on Twitch, and following me on Twitter is a great way of getting the latest on my streaming schedule and video releases. But until the next, have a day.